said many times in the past that I believe that all of the end times prophecies were fulfilled in AD 70 in the first century. I believe that the return of Christ, the resurrection of the dead, and the passing away of the old heaven and earth, and the establishing of the new heaven and earth creation, all of those prophecies found their fulfillment in AD 70 when the Romans besieged and destroyed the old covenant city of Jerusalem and the Jewish temple. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 34 and 35, Jesus was very clear when he said that all of his apocalyptic predictions concerning the end times were going to be fulfilled in that generation, and that heaven and earth would pass away, but his words would not pass away. Now, obviously, I don't believe that the physical heaven and earth passed away. That wouldn't make any sense. What I believe is that when the scriptures talk about or talked about the passing away of heaven and earth, it was really talking about the old covenant as a type of covenantal, it's a type of world or a type of heaven and earth creation. In fact, when Jesus said in Matthew 24, and I'll just go to that passage really quick. In Matthew 24, verse 34 and 35, Jesus said, "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away." When Jesus said that, he was echoing directly from an Old Testament passage in Isaiah chapter 51, verse 6. Where Yahweh said, "Lift up your eyes to the sky, then look to the earth beneath. For the sky will vanish like smoke," there's the passing away of heavens, "and the earth will wear out like a garment, and its inhabitants will die in like manner." So there's the passing away of heaven and earth right there. "But my salvation will be forever, and my righteousness will not wane." However, when we keep reading through Isaiah 51 and we come to verse 16, we find out that God was not talking about the physical heaven and earth. He says in verse 16, "I have put my words in your mouth and have covered you with the shadow of my hand, to establish the heavens, to found the earth, and to say to Zion, you are my people." So this is clearly not talking about the heaven and earth that's created in Genesis chapter 1, because he's saying that it was when he put his words into the mouths of the Jews or the Hebrews that he established the heavens and founded the earth. And so it was when he led the Hebrews out of bondage to Egypt and gave his covenant to them through Moses, that it was by giving his covenant through Moses to the Hebrews that he established the heavens and founded the earth. So if Jesus was quoting in Matthew 24, 34, and 35, if he was quoting directly from Isaiah 51, verse 6, and Isaiah 51 makes it clear right here that it was not talking about the physical creation passing away, then that means that Jesus was not talking about the physical creation passing away in Matthew chapter 24, verse 35. So I believe that when the Old and New Testaments predicted that the heaven and earth creation would pass away, it was talking about the old covenant passing away, the old covenant that God had given to the Hebrews through Moses. Now, one passage that I want to go to and focus on in order to give credibility to this view is 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 10 through 12. And I'm going to read this really quick, and then I'll show what the evidence is in this passage that suggests that Peter was not talking about the physical heaven and earth passing away, but rather he was talking about the old covenant passing away, the law of Moses. So in 2 Peter 3, verses 10 through 12, he said, "But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up. Since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, what sort of people ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be destroyed by burning, and the elements will melt with intense heat. But according to his promise, we are looking for new heavens and a new earth, in which righteousness dwells." Okay, so what is the evidence here that tells us that this is talking about the old covenant, the law of Moses? The evidence is found in the original Greek language that Peter wrote this in. When I click on this word, elements, you can see that it brings up the actual Greek word stoicheion. That's the word that Peter used and is translated into English. It's rendered as elements. And this word stoicheion is found 7 times in the New Testament. And what I want you to notice is that right here, you can see a list of every instance where this word is used in the New Testament, all 7 times. It's used in Galatians 4:3, Galatians 4:9, Colossians 2:8, Colossians 2:20, Hebrews 5:12, and 2 Peter 3:10 and 3:12. And what needs to be noticed about this is that in each one of these instances, the word stoicheion is always referring to the elements of the law of Moses, not the elements of the physical universe. This is the word stoicheion is the word that the Apostle Paul used on multiple occasions to refer to the elements of the law. When Paul wrote his letter to the church in Galatia, he was writing to them in response to the fact that he had heard that the Christians there, were reverting back to practicing Judaism. They were reverting back to practicing the law of Moses, and they were seeking to be justified by adhering to those works of the law. And so Paul wrote his letter to the Galatians in response to that, in an attempt to correct their thinking and correct their theology, and to remind them that they are justified by faith in Christ alone, not by works. And so in Galatians chapter 4, verse 3, he says, "So also we, while we were children, were held in bondage under the elemental things of the world." And then in verse 9, he says, "But now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, how is it that you turn back again to the weak and worthless elemental things, to which you desire to be enslaved all over again? You observe days and months and seasons and years. I fear for you that perhaps I have labored over you in vain." Now you can read the whole chapter, or you can read the entire letter yourself from your Bible and get the full context of what's being talked about here. But what Paul is clearly talking about is he's talking about the elements of the law, because and it's important to notice that when I click on this word elemental things, or the phrase elemental things, it comes up with that Greek word stoicheion. In both instances, in verse 3 and verse 9. And so that's the same word that Peter used in 2 Peter chapter 3. And this is not the only instance where Paul used that word in reference to the elements of the law. He also said this in Colossians chapter 2. Verses 8 as well as verse 20, I believe. Yeah. So in Colossians chapter 2, Paul said, "See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world." Once again, when I click on that phrase, elementary principles, it comes up with the Greek word stoicheion. According to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Christ. And he goes on, and then he says in verse 20, "If you have died with Christ to the elementary principles," there it is again, stoicheion, "the elementary principles of the world, why, as if you were living in the world, do you submit yourself to decrees such as do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, which all refer to things destined to perish with use, in accordance with the commandments and teachings of men." Now, something else that should be noticed here is that if I click on this other word, world, you can see that it's the Greek word cosmos. And while most Christians who study their Bibles will, when they see the word world, they generally think of the physical world, the physical earth and the physical universe. That's not what Paul here is talking about. Clearly, he's talking about the law, the elements of the law, and he's calling them the elements of a world. What kind of world? A covenantal world, not the physical world. And he uses that phrase again. He uses that phrase also in Galatians chapter 4, which I just went in Galatians 4:3. He said elemental things of the world there as well. So in both instances, he's talking about the elements of the law, and the law here, he's referring to it as a type of world. And so we see here scriptural evidence telling us that in the Bible there is a such thing as a covenantal world as opposed to a physical world. And that is the world that I believe was to pass away, because, like I said, this Greek word stoicheion that Peter used in 2 Peter chapter 3, it's used 7 times throughout the New Testament. Now, if Peter was talking about the elements of the physical world or the physical universe, like the elements of the periodic table, then why is it that in every single instance where that word stoicheion is used in the New Testament, it always refers to the elements of the law of Moses? And so I believe that this fact alone, that every instance where this Greek word is used in the New Testament, it's clearly talking about the elements of the Mosaic law. I think that fact alone should lead us to reconsider what the Bible means when it foretold the passing away of the heavens and the earth. I think that this tells us very clearly that what Peter was talking about in his epistle was that the elements of that covenantal world right there that Paul was talking about, the elements of that world were going to be burned and pass away. And that's what happened in the year AD 70. When the Romans besieged and destroyed Jerusalem, they burned both the city and the temple. And since that time, the law of Moses has been completely passed away. It's been completely obsolete since then. It's been literally impossible for anybody to fully adhere to the law of Moses, because according to the old covenant, you have to have a temple in order to observe the entire law of Moses. And so without the temple, you can't adhere to the whole law if you don't even have a temple. And so hopefully you find this helpful.